Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, and welcome to Pangolin, the conservation podcast. I'm your host, Jack Baker, and welcome to the show dedicated to amplifying the amazing, inspiring, incredible, wonderful, empowering stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. On today's show, we will continue our exploration of the land of the lemurs with the incredible Marni LaFleur. You may remember her if you've listened to some of the other episodes. She gave us our quick guide to responsible tourism. Well, she's back to talk more about her charity LemurLove and their three very, very important goals: protect lemurs, empower women, and further science. And under those three headings, we cover so much, but it's a really great conversation. So we have protect lemurs. We talk about things like the pet trade and a little bit more about responsible tourism if you missed out on that earlier on. Empowering women, we talk about how the charity tries to kind of achieve this goal and the many methods and kind of how the relationship works with being someone who isn't from Madagascar, how the dynamics work there as well. It's a really interesting conversation there that, yes, I really think you'll all enjoy. And of course, we have further science. And further science, we talk about a lot of the new discoveries that the charity has found, things about tuberculosis being in lemurs and other kind of scary but fascinating discoveries that they are kind of a part of. And so it's a really diverse but really great episode, and I'm sure you will all really love it. I certainly do, and I cannot thank Marnie enough for her time. Now, I will leave it there for just now, and I will let the interview play because, as I say, it's a really fascinating one, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have had to have this conversation because it is just fantastic. But I'll be back at the end of the show just to wrap up as always. So for now, thank you so much for listening, and as always, thank you for joining us as we explore the land of the lemurs. Thank you. Welcome back to the show. I am now joined by Dr. Marni LaFleur, the founder and director of LemurLove, whose work focuses on the legal and illegal wild capture and trade of lemurs within Madagascar. She is here to tell us all about that work. So thank you very much for joining us today, Marni.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for being here again. And yes, I wondered, just to get started, if you could introduce yourself to the listeners and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah. So I am Marni LaFleur. Let me see, what about myself? I live and work in California in the United States. I'm from Canada, but I live and work in the United States, and I do research and conservation work in Madagascar.
Yes, that is exactly what we're going to be talking about. And I think
Great.
actually you are my first guest from Canada. So there's a
Ah,
another thing
okay.
ticked off the list. We've
That's right.
I think I've had guests from everywhere except the continent of North America. So we've ticked another one off the list there.
Wow, great. Okay.
um, but yes, I, just to get started, I think one of the most impressive and interesting things that you've done, certainly to me, when I was doing my research, is you, of course, founded this organization, LemurLove. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about what inspired you to create this organization and what it does. Tell the listeners a little bit about it.
Sure, yeah. So, what inspired Lemur Love? Well, actually, I didn't have very sort of grand goals. I was just concerned about the animals that I was studying. I was concerned about habitat loss within a national park. And so I just wanted to be able to essentially raise enough money that I could continue to go to Madagascar and check in on these animals and continue to do really small scale research for myself, small scale research within this national park. But it's really changed quite a bit, and our goals and what we're trying to accomplish are much more grand than how they started.
hmm Yes, and your annual report from 2020 made the task of writing questions very easy for me because it kind of focuses on these three goals,
Right.
which are protect lemurs, empower women, and further science. And we're going to go through each of those today. And if we start in the kind of very first one I mentioned there, protect lemurs. Of course, this whole series has been about lemurs, so it makes sense to start there. And I wanted to kind of focus mostly on your work with the kind of pet trade and the legal illegal capture of the lemurs. And I wondered, that's something that we haven't covered before on the podcast. I wondered if you could maybe give the listeners a bit of an introduction to what this issue is and kind of what's the scale and that sort of thing. What actually is the issue here?
Sure. Okay. So, yes, lemurs are the most endangered group of vertebrates, as you may know, with more than 98% of lemur species being threatened with extinction. So, they're a big concern to conservationists. And in particular, the pet trade in Madagascar is quite problematic because mostly babies are captured from the wild in order to be for a couple of reasons. One, in order to be just a personal pet that somebody just wants to have a pet, or in order to generate income. And you really only need to generate a very small amount of income with a baby lemur or with a grown lemur in order for it to be worthwhile. So, for example, if one wanted to purchase a wild captured lemur in the south of Madagascar, you could do so for about $2 US. And so, if you think about that amount of money and having a baby lemur and trying to, from the perspective of somebody trying to make money with it, they really have to generate very little money from a tourist in order to be in the positive, in order for there to be a reward for them doing this behavior. So it's the issue is people really paying in order to interact with lemurs is quite problematic.
Hmm.
I think I got really off track there. I'm sorry.
No, it's exactly it's
Yeah.
exactly the answer that I expected. So not off track
Okay.
at all.
Okay. Okay.
I wondered, just to, yes, I wondered if we could kind of, if I could ask kind of a little bit of what is the kind of of scale of that issue then? Is it something that is a few hundred lemurs a year? Is it in the like thousands? How many lemurs each year are being taken for this purpose, or is
Yeah.
it?
So it's really hard to say because of the nature of poaching and the nature of having animals that are illegal to possess. So it's hard. It's you can't just go out and count or ask people how many lemurs they've had and sort of figure it out. But we know that it's not hundreds. We know that it's not millions. We know that it's probably one of the estimates that we have published is about 30,000 lemurs in a 6 months period were within the pet trade. So we think that it's within the tens to hundreds of thousands of lemurs. And for some species that have less than 100 individuals remaining, those aren't specifically the ones that are trafficked. But for some lemur species, this could be really detrimental to their survivor.
Hmm. Hmm. It's one of those things that it's an awful thing to say, but it makes sense because they are such charismatic animals. They are something that's going to appeal to someone, and it's an easy way for somebody to make money. It
Absolutely,
makes
yeah,
sense that people go out and do something like this. It's just for conservationists like you and I, it's something that I can't fully comprehend. But if I try and remove
right.
myself from the situation, I can see where the appeal for the people selling it is, and the appeal for the
Yeah.
buyers is. It's just a it's.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they're adorable. Who doesn't want to play with a baby lemur for a few minutes and take a photo and have a good time and just enjoy the animal? Of course, we would all like to do that. But when you see it from the perspective of, okay, this animal is going to live for 30 years and it's going to have we know that their lives are really not very good. So when you see it from that other perspective, it's difficult.
Mhm. And I wondered on the same topic there, just in the beginning, I mentioned that your work kind of focuses on the legal and illegal, and I wondered
Right.
if there was a distinction there. Is there the legal element? Is there a are there areas where this type of behavior is allowed to take place, where people are allowed to take these things, or is it something that mainly is banned? And what's the law around that? Where does that kind of stand?
So yeah, both. I mean, these are protected animals, and Madagascar is part of Madagascar adheres to CITES, so they should not be exploiting endangered animals. But there is sort of this loophole. Well, two things. One, there's a lot of corruption in Madagascar, so the way that things are supposed to go isn't necessarily the way that things do go. And the other thing is that there's this sort of loophole wherein organizations or facilities such as there's a zoo in the capital city of Madagascar. So a zoo that has legal permission to exist may be granted permission to also wild capture species of lemur that they want to possess within their collection. And for a lot of these places, they're sort of targeted to tourists. So the organization wants to have animals that the tourists like. And those may or may not be suitable to being wild captured and then kept in captivity. So it can create a cycle of going out and capturing an animal, having it for tourists to view. The animal does not survive very long, and then you have to go out and capture again. And so the permits are granted for this type of activity. So the facilities may be completely doing this legally, or the facilities may sort of skirt around the system and just acquire their own animals under this sort of guise that they have permission to keep them, regardless of how many times they go out and recapture.
Mhm. That's the awkward thing, is that you like to think all of these organizations are doing it with the best of intentions to educate and inspire, but it's the loopholes in that whether something is
Yeah,
legal and ethical are two very different questions.
that's correct. Yeah,
Mhm,
and I mean there are some very good dedicated facilities within Madagascar that are doing conservation and they're aiming to protect the animals and they take in animals that are legitimately caught within the pet trade. But the vast majority of them, their goal is not conservation or to take the best care of the animals that they can. Their goal is to make money off of tourists. And so they target tourists. All that they do is to increase their revenue. It's not to protect the animals that they have.
mhm. That's yeah, it's something that I think everybody has to be very careful of
That's right.
when they're assessing organize, and it's dangerous to make blanket statements about things. So it is one of those things that you have to really look at each case individually. It's very complicated and very imagine
Absolutely.
very
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So you definitely want to know the place that you're going and see like what is the primary goal of this place? Who is most benefiting from this? Is it the animals? Is it me? Is it somebody else? And decide where the ways in which you want to spend your money.
And I kind of wondered, following up on that, is this is obviously a challenge, the ethical legal balance. Is what are the other challenges that kind of obviously it's a very under the table, hidden. It's not something that will be broadcast widely, presumably, but so it's a kind of hidden, I guess, trade. Are there other challenges apart from that kind of unearthing of the data? What are the other
Um,
challenges?
sure. So, I mean, one of the things that I've come to realize, and this is not shocking information, but that conservation, I got into conservation because I love animals, and I see conservation sort of through the sphere of protecting these fuzzy animals that I love. Many of us do. That's why we care about them, just because we love animals. But conservation really is not about animals at all. Conservation is about people. And if people weren't part of the equation, we probably wouldn't be worried about conservation. So people is really where we need to focus our efforts because these are the reasons animals are disappearing. And in the case of Madagascar, the big issue is poverty. So with the vast majority of people in Madagascar, particularly in the south, the vast majority of people live on less than $2 a day. This has to be addressed before we can even come to the table and talk about how we're going to save lemurs because people have much more urgent and pressing needs than considering the long term.
Mhm, mhm. That's it's always an awkward thing, and it's come up in the conversations I've had so far about lemurs. All it's kind of time and time again is this when there's people. Conservation always, as you say, has to come back to the people, and when there are people suffering, and there's all of these pressing concerns that are going to naturally take the the forefront of their minds. They just trying to survive on a kind of day to day basis. Going in, the
Absolutely.
conservation work really does have to put them at the forefront and realize that only once certain things have been secured can they start working on other issues. It's yeah a real yeah. I
Yeah,
admire
absolutely.
everybody who manages to work that out because it's a very tricky balance to try and
It really is. And, COVID sort of brought that to the forefront for us in that as we're thinking about, okay, the world has changed and what are we going to do about it? We're just realizing that people that are suffering, people that are living right next to lemurs,
Mhm,
unless we address the fact that they suddenly have no money and no income and no prospects, how can we possibly ask them not to exploit the only resources that are within their realm? I mean, we have to provide an alternative if we're going to say, please, we want to maintain the forest, we want to maintain the lemur's habitat, as they will do as well. I mean, they're aware of the problem of conservation and wanting to protect these animals. So we really had to provide alternatives, and sort of change our focus on making sure that the people are doing okay, at least okay, in order to maintain the habitat and the populations of lemurs.
I think that's interesting because it's interesting to see the kind of contrast between the way it was portrayed here in the UK, especially. I think was, wow, look at all the COVID. No one's traveling, no one's doing anything, and look at all the birds coming back, and all the this and the
Yeah,
that, and the natural kind of species. And obviously, when you're in the UK and everybody like isn't living in poverty in the way that it is
right.
so prolific in Madagascar, it's very different issues, and I think it's sometimes about widening that scope of don't
Sure,
just look in
yeah.
your neighborhood, look abroad and what else is going on. That these conservation issues still did they didn't all get better immediately
Yeah,
because the people around them all all were affected in very very different ways.
right.
It's yeah.
Yeah, one of the things, I mean, um, I sorry, I kind of lost my train there. But one of the things that became really evident to us is that, I don't know if I can swear, but what we were thinking was, holy shit! Like, if we don't do something, there will be nothing left. Like, next time I want to go to the field and see these animals that I've been following for 12 or 15 years, the individual lemurs I've been following, there won't be anything there because people have no, people literally have no food, no money, there's no vehicles moving around, so there's no resources moving around. Like, people didn't have soap in their house or anything to eat. So what are they going to do? I mean, the only option for those people to survive is to go and exploit the forest. So we really kind of were thinking a couple of steps ahead and just thinking, like, we have to move fast in order to make sure that these animals are going to remain, and to negate the obvious human suffering that would be going on.
Mhm, mhm. And yeah, it's moving quickly and thinking quickly and doing all of these things when it's unprecedented almost that you don't
Right.
know how to. There's no formula to follow to say this is we do A then B then C and we'll have this sort. It must yeah it must have been an
Yeah.
incredibly difficult time actually to.
Yeah, and I mean, we're all of us that are working at LemurLove, we're biologists. We're people that are interested in animals. So we're not specialists in, in development or in sustainability or in human aid. But this is kind of how you have to be quick on your feet and willing to adapt, in order to make sure that everybody's goals are, sort of stay within the realm of possibility.
Mhm, mhm. I hate to move on from it because it's
Oh
such a
no, sure,
it's I mean it's not a it's not an interesting topic in the way that it's a happy good interest. It's an interesting topic to talk
sure,
about and an important topic to talk about. So it is unfortunate we do kind of have to move
of
on
course,
slightly, but I think it's important that we don't only focus on the negative as there has is bound to have been some great successes also within the last few months or year surrounding this kind of protection of lemurs. Um, so I wondered if we could kind of move on slightly and just talk about some of the recent successes that have come in your protection of lemur work. Is there any that stand out to you as really important or really stand out moments for you personally?
Yeah, well, one of the things that is important to remember, especially with lemurs, is that they can bounce back really quickly. If
Hmm.
we leave them alone and just let them be, they will be okay. They will do just fine. And so, one of the things that I got from the field not too long ago was, updated camera trap photos. So I've got camera traps in the forest where I work, and there were pictures. I think there were. Let me see, a mom lemur that I know, and then I think there were either 3 or 4 infants in the background of the camera trap picture, and so that was just really wonderful for me to be able to see because I haven't been in a couple of years. I haven't seen these individuals, but they're just trucking along. They had a good year with lots of babies surviving, and they're just continuing to do what they've done for millennia. So if we just let them do their own thing and inhabit their own forest, they will be just fine.
Mhm. Those must be the images and the things that really just it must validate everything that all the hard work and all the challenges when you see that, oh, okay, something that I recognize is not just surviving, it's kind of also not thriving is maybe not the right word because of the circumstance, but they're doing
Sure.
well when they
Yeah,
feel like it. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And because I know specific individuals, conservation can be really difficult and very hard because you can feel very overwhelmed and like everything is hopeless. And the problem is just so big that how can you ever have some kind of an impact? But for me, one of the things that is really important is to think about individuals. So that counts for lemurs and that counts for peoples too, knowing that you make a difference to individuals. And one of the things that I wanted to commit to do when I first started LemurLove was that I wanted these lemurs, these specific three groups of lemurs, these lineages of lemurs, I wanted to make sure that they outlived me. And so I feel this sort of sense of responsibility to these few animals. And so when I see that they are doing okay, they're still there. I mean, they could have been doing okay without me with trying to do anything as well. But knowing that I've had some hand in making sure that these guys are okay really brings me a lot of joy.
That's fantastic, actually. And I think that's a really it's a good goal to have is that as long as I can see my mission through to that these animals survive longer than I do, that is all because then you have to pass the baton on to kind of the next group of people and they
Yeah,
hopefully they can pick up and keep them going as
exactly.
well.
Like we can't all fix everything, but we can take control of some small things. And if we were all to do that, we'd be doing okay.
Mhm. Yes, yeah, I like that. Let's make the small differences. If everybody did a small difference or everyone did a little thing, it amounts to lots of big things. So that is, yeah, actually
Absolutely.
that's perfect.
It's really
Um,
hard to remember that in conservation because the problems are so big and they're so sad and they're so daunting. But if we can concentrate on really small things, we can have a significant impact.
mhm. That reminds it's I've mentioned it before on the show, so listeners will probably have heard this story before. But it reminds me of when I was doing my masters. My supervisor for my dissertation was talking about how one of the last things she said to me was never give up, kind of, or never let go of that joy that you have. When it comes to conservation, because there will be these big issues, but at the end of the day, and if you take a seat and think about what you're doing and think about these little achievements and what you've done, it's joyful and it's something that there would be hundreds of kids would dream to be doing what you're doing. And it's
That's
something that all
right.
these
Yeah,
it's something that is kind of this like it's it's this like childlike rush you get of just like I did that. I did these
right.
things. So it's a good thing to kind of hold on to there as well.
Yeah, it's important to sort of think back and recognize the gains, the wins in conservation because they don't always come, but when they do, and even if they're small, it's important.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think speaking of wins, an excellent transition, if I do say so myself, is your, of course, your next goal, which is your work with empowering women. Um, and I think I was actually talking to Sahino the other day,
Oh,
who you work
great.
with. Yes, so we were talking about baobabs, which was really, really interesting. And I was talking to her, and I asked her a little bit about the lemur, a little bit about lemur love and your work with empowering women. But um, I wondered if you could tell the listeners more about that and why it was so important to you to kind of um, really embed this value kind of right at the center of your organization.
Yeah. So let me see. In Madagascar, it's different. I mean, it's culturally very different, and so I struggle with kind of having this colonialist outlook because I am somebody from a foreign nation that is coming in and doing things to change things that are existing. So I yeah, I sort of grapple with that. But within Madagascar, it's very much a patriarchal hierarchy within terms of men and women. So it's much more typical for men to work outside of the house, and men have access to a lot of resources that women don't. So if you're talking about a more poverty-stricken area, and you think about a household, the women will be at home. They will likely have a number of children to take care of and to try and feed. The men go outside of the house and they have opportunities to do things like eat meat and partake in things that the family just wouldn't have the opportunity to. And so one of the things that we're learning as conservationists, that you kind of get a little bit more bang for your buck if you're going into an area and you focus on women, because um, in order to elevate women to the same status or to have the same sort of resource access that men do, you don't have to do a whole lot, but it makes a really big difference to each household and to the women within that community. So this is one of the reasons why we really wanted to focus on women.
And I wonder what kind of work does your organization do to kind of help empower these women and kind of include them in the conservation discussion and the kind of action there.
Sure. So there's kind of two different ways. One is within urban women. So those are women mostly that are either students, university students, or have graduated from university and their early career, maybe researchers or conservationists. And the other is rural women who are living in areas next to lemurs. So these are quite different because in the rural situation, things like illiteracy are quite high, and these individuals just have really little access to resources, very little amount of power or say within their community. Whereas in the urban situation, these are educated people that have lots of experience. So it depends on where we're talking, but the aim still is to elevate both women in both situations.
I guess if we start with, I guess, the urban situation, what would the types of things be that you would normally, I guess, what would you want to kind of work on with them on, or what kind?
Yeah, so there's a big gap between education in Madagascar and education outside of Madagascar.
Mhm.
And so we know that, for example, about 90% of publications on biodiversity on Malagasy species is published by foreign researchers. And so we really want to change that. We want for Malagasy people to really have a stake in their own country's conservation and in their own academic achievement within their country. And so one of the things that we did last year was a writing fellowship. We had 7 Malagasy writing fellows where we helped them work through. They have their own data, they have their own research and their own data, and we help them work through creating a publication with their own data. And so this is one of the things that's sort of lacking, is how to go from being a student into being a professional and publishing your research um, internationally. So we
Mhm.
really want to sort of help bridge that gap with the next generation of conservationists and researchers in Madagascar.
Mhm. That's such a good thing to target, because I think it's something that even in countries that probably like to think of themselves as very educationally developed, that's something that I once you finish university or once you finish school or whatever level you choose to go to, that's not something that you get taught. So to kind of go to the extra effort then to go into these kind of communities and help them with that difficult next step is actually a
Right.
really clever, a
Yeah, and
clever good place to target.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. And it's something that we can offer. I'm an academic, so this is something that I can do. Um,
mhm,
and and yeah, I mean, everybody needs to have these skills. But if English isn't your first language, and if you're not really familiar with academics outside of Madagascar, you really do need a little bit of help. Just a small amount of help in order to be like fully capable of doing and publishing your own work. So that's really what we want. Is we want people in Madagascar to be as invested as they can be in conserving the species that they know and love.
mhm. And I guess then in the kind of outside of the urban areas, I guess people are closer to nature, living in areas which, yeah, they're maybe more exposed to what's the natural world and what people are trying to conserve, I guess, less the academic side and more the practical. I wondered what
Yeah,
the kind of situation would be then in that type of context. What would you do
sure.
there?
Yeah. So what we have to do in this sort of, the farther away from the arena where I live and work, the more I just have to listen. And so what we have been doing in the communities where we work, that of people that live next to lemurs, is just asking them, what is your life like? What do you want? How can we help you? What could we do that would make your life easier and allow you to not have to exploit forest resources? And what these women were telling us was that their biggest obstacle was making sure their kids had food all year round. So in the lean seasons, there's really high food insecurity, and they don't want that. They want to be able to feed their families all year round. And so that's really been our focus. Since COVID, we've had to actually provide direct aid so that people can access food and medicines. But our goal is to create sustainable development so that they can do that on their own. With COVID happening, it's just not possible because how can you work towards developing something when you don't have anything to eat that day? It just doesn't work. But in general, this is what they have told us they want, and so that is what our goal is to make that happen.
Hmm. Yes, and it kind of links back to the previous discussion where I think a lot of people think conservation is people out in the field all the time taking photos of animals and kind of registering animals and writing things down. But actually, it's more than that. It's the the talking to people and going what necessarily the the image of kind of helping people find food and kind of this
Right.
is not something necessarily that would people necessarily come to people's minds straight away
That's
when
right.
thinking about conservation,
Yeah.
but it's a really important and interesting element there.
I really wish it was
Mhm.
following around and photographing animals all day. That would be wonderful. I try to dedicate for all of the work that I do in Madagascar. I try to dedicate 50% of my time to people, 50% of my time to animals and the research that I do. 100% on animals would be wonderful, but if I did that and didn't help people at all, I know that I won't have animals at the end of the day.
Yes, yes. Thinking about the long term
Yeah,
solutions rather than
exactly.
just these bandages that you could maybe put on in the short term that, oh, we've increased this number of lemurs, but as soon as you leave the place, then it doesn't actually, it's not fixed because yeah, that's.
Well, it's even more selfish than that. It's just that I'd like to spend the whole day in the forest. It's just much more. I mean, it's just really fun. I really love following lemurs around and seeing what they do, and I just like to get dirty and have fun in the forest. But I know that I can't do that every day.
That's the one thing I'm realizing. The more people I speak to throughout this kind of interview series, the more I'm kind of like, I need to go to Madagascar right now. I need
Oh
to the
dear
first
God,
flights that
yes,
open up.
yes, yes,
um,
yes. What do you study? I know. I mean, I know the pangolins, but what do you like? What is?
So I previously did my master's was in conservation studies, but it was interdisciplinary. So we looked at kind of all sorts of elements from biology to politics, and my particular interest is kind of the communication. As you may guess from someone who has a podcast about conservation, my interest is
Yes,
the communication of conservation, and trying to. I guess I've been thinking about it a lot recently, what I want to do next, and what the kind of opportunities are, because it's I like to think I want to think kind of more critically about how we communicate conservation in a way to everybody, because I feel like sometimes you get this almost neo-colonial portrayal of conservation on television and in all these books and things that we have to go in and we have to act and we have to go and save all these things, but actually I don't. The more people I speak to and the more I read, the more I realize actually the way that we portray it as that might not be the best way to teach people about
right.
it. So that's kind of where my interests lie, and it's figuring out the next step and how to kind of critically examine that without upsetting
Right.
a whole lot of people. But I think it might be a case where a whole lot.
Well, it's important, and I think now is a good time to be considering these kinds of things. I kind of had a reality check of my own a couple of years ago, just thinking, really sort of critically thinking about colonialism and what it is to be a foreign researcher to go in and have control of a lot of things that local people just simply wouldn't. I mean, when I did my dissertation work, I lived in Madagascar for the better part of a year, and it cost around 60,000 US dollars. And that's everything. So, like, I had to pay tuition that year. I had to buy flights to go to Madagascar. I had to, I had a field assistant. This was everything for an entire year. And then I wasn't really aware of yeah, I just wasn't really thinking. This was a decade ago. I wasn't really thinking in terms of conservation at that point, or in terms of human suffering or human aid. And $60,000 is a really lot of money, especially when you're thinking that in the village nearest where I was living, there are children that are actually succumbing to starvation. I mean, that sounds really gloom and doom. I'm sorry. I always make things like a little bit more sad, but it was really me sort of grappling with my role in this and how can I how can I be the best that I can be when what who I am is somebody that arrives in the field in a Land Rover? Like I just don't. It just really kind of gives me the creeps. It rubs me the wrong way to have this very sort of colonial position. But there's not. I can't change who I am. I can't change the situation. I can only try to make it do the best that I can do within the framework that I'm in.
It's one of those situations where it's like I can't change where I was born or um what I kind of have done up to this point, but what I can change is what I'm going to do going forward and how I
Exactly.
could how I work and how I view the world. And it's not a single change that I'm going to change right now and this is what I'm going to be. It's a learning process of
Right.
I had this thought and this was the way that I did act and kind of learning and growing and accepting sometimes when you're challenged about certain things or it's a real development process.
Yeah,
It's
and
yeah.
with much of the world and much of what has happened in the world in the last few years, growing and getting more comfortable being uncomfortable is what we have to do, especially when we're considering, differential power dynamics and we're considering, race relations and colonialism, all of these things. We just have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, which is not really that fun, but is important in the larger process of learning and doing the best that you can.
It's yes. And yes, hopefully the listeners are not too. We're not telling you you have to drop everything and change everything,
Oh
but
no, and
do
I'm
think about what you're doing. And yes,
yeah.
um,
I mean, I'm really deep in now, right? Like I've been doing this for like 15 years and really reflecting on my actions and reflecting on, how can I best, um, you know, how can I be my best for this situation? And it's not that I'm just sort of embarking in this now. This is a long time sort of coming and thinking about things. So people that the one of the wonderful things about taking students or taking new people to the field, one of the things that I love so much is their enthusiasm and how excited they are to see all of these new and wonderful things. For me, I'm getting a little long in the tooth. I'm jaded. I've seen it before. And I'm just thinking about the sort of bigger picture. So it's wonderful to have people that are young and enthusiastic and sort of embarking on their careers, come and see Madagascar as well.
mhm. Yes, yes. And I guess that actually transitions us onto the final topic I wanted to ask you about, the final goal, because we're talking looking forward in the next generation. The third goal is, of course, further science. And I wondered what kind of to start off the discussion, what the kind of big achievements for you personally for furthering science are. What are the ones that LemurLove has achieved that come to your mind?
Yeah, so one of the things that that we are doing now is a long-term data collection on ring-tailed lemurs, and this is the longest-term active project. So long-term research isn't necessarily that sort of sexy. It's just doing the same thing over and over again, and then seeing what you see in the long term.
Mhm,
Um, but that's really important for us, especially because the field site where I work, it's called Petsus National Park, and
mhm,
it has the lowest primary productivity of any location that we know of in Madagascar. So these animals are really living on the edge in terms of the resources that they have to survive. And so this is also the area that is going to be the most impacted by climate change. And so
mhm,
I sort of think of these lemurs as like the canary in the coal mine, that we're in actual time, we are watching how they can and perhaps cannot adapt to the most extreme conditions, that there are on the planet, really. So this is why it's particularly important to be able to see, what these lemurs are doing. Another thing that, we found last year or a couple of years ago was related to the pet trade. And so we found a young lemur that succumbed to tuberculosis. And so this is demonstrating zoonotic disease transmission. So this was the human version of tuberculosis was found in this lemur. And so with COVID and with our renewed interest in diseases between wildlife and humans, this was an important find for us.
mhm, mhm. That's yes, a scary find, I imagine, but
Yeah,
an
yeah.
interesting one to kind of. How do you? I guess if it's an I take it an isolated case. uh, how do you then? What's the research step there? Do you then look at the lemur and try and work out where it may have got it from or what the circumstances were? What is the how do you begin to deal with something like that?
Well, yeah. So, what the big concern is, we don't know. So we know that humans can give tuberculosis to lemurs, but we don't know if lemurs can then give tuberculosis to other lemurs. So that's the big concern. Is okay. Well, because often people, once pet lemurs become sexually mature and are adults, they get really aggressive and they're really not that fun to have around your house. And so people will often think, well, I'm just going to take it back to a forest and let it go live wild. And so this is really concerning in terms of disease transmissions, because the animals can pick up diseases from humans and then transfer them to the wild population, which is absolutely what we don't want. So we don't know if this is possible for tuberculosis. We don't know if a lemur can go back to the wild and transmit the disease, but we know that they have the previous step, which means they can get it from humans and then have that disease and actually die from it. So we know that there's something going on there. We don't know the whole picture.
That's it's another thing that's, I mean, not good, but really an interesting project to be working on. And yeah, something I guess that I will be making sure to follow all of your websites and work and social media to because that's a really interesting thing to kind of keep
Yeah.
tabs on and see what the kind of development is, especially as you say in a world where zoonotic disease transmission is yes on
Yeah, and this is
yes.
another reason to caution people against interacting with wildlife.
Mhm,
There's one particular resort. So for 2019, I collected Instagram photos from all of these facilities in Madagascar where people go as tourists. So the places that have lemurs on premises, tourists go there and they interact with the animals. So I collected all of these photos to look at how people are doing this. And one of the ways that some of these resorts encourage people to interact with the lemurs is to feed them mouth to mouth. So to put a piece of fruit in your own mouth and then go up to a lemur and feed from your mouth to the lemur's mouth. So this is like an epidemiologist's worst nightmare. Like to have direct salival contact between humans and wildlife is a really, really bad idea. So hopefully people are becoming more aware of this and will be less inclined to interact with wildlife in this way.
Yeah, 'cause I love animals, but I don't yeah, I don't think I'd want to be doing that. No.
No, no. I
Yeah.
mean, they've got big teeth, and it's just, oh my goodness, it just, yeah. From my
Yeah.
perspective, it's like a nightmare. But I can understand that they're cute, and people get sort of caught in the moment and perhaps a little carried away.
Yes, because I feel like after the last year, my body is now probably instead of blood about 50 or water about 50% hand sanitizer. So the thought of doing something like that is yeah.
Just-
Is
yeah. Well,
uh,
our thoughts have changed. Our
yes.
thinking about diseases and about disease transmissions have definitely changed. So hopefully, post COVID, this will continue.
Yes, yes. And I wondered, looking forward then again, towards you mentioned a couple of things there that you were working on. Is there any projects coming up that you're kind of particularly excited for or looking forward to?
Yes, so I've been working on a project looking at again social media photos and posts about. You may know that there is a traditional taboo against eyes in some areas of Madagascar.
Yes.
And so I'm interested in local people's reactions to these posts about directly killing eyes in order to sort of do away with the bad omen or the evil spirit. So this doesn't sound like a very fun project, but it actually has been really interesting to me. And it's been great to be able to find some different ways to do research when you can't go to the field. So that this II paper is in the works and hopefully will be published soon.
Yes, yes. The creativity. That's the thing. Every conversation we've had and every point that we've hit on throughout has just, I think, shown the creative lengths that people have gone to in conservation over the last year to kind of get it. And it's an interesting thing to So yes, to be thinking about, and
That's right. Yeah.
the kind of non-classic ways of, it's not sitting in a lab doing science, it's not in the forest doing science, it's looking at other potential interesting
Yeah,
areas.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I saw
Okay.
a news story yesterday that was just about collecting endangered species DNA from the air in order to be able to detect if those species are present in an area. And one of the animals they were able to detect was the black and white ruffed lemur. So, I mean, who even thought that up? That we're going to try to collect genetic material from the air? But these are the kinds of things we think of when we are getting creative with conservation.
That's, yeah. I think one of my favorites that I read was, it was something called the Snotbot. It is a
Okay.
drone that they fly when a whale breaches, and it kind of blows. They fly it through this drone and they catch everything that comes out of the whale, and
That's
then using
amazing.
that they can then tell if the whale is pregnant. They can tell what the kind of health status is and all these kind of things. I was like, how
Wow.
anyone ever thought of that?
Who thought of that? Yeah, that's wonderful. I want to be that person's friend.
I don't want to be, if I'm the person who has it's my drone and they go, "Can I borrow your drone for a day? I have an idea." That comes back covered in whale
Yeah.
goo. Uh,
You hope it comes back.
oh, um, yes, I guess that kind of brings to the us to the end of the main conversation. It's a shame because I've had such a it's been such a pleasure talking to you, because
Oh
it's
yeah.
been such a good. It's been, while the topics have sometimes been dark, it has been. I think we've taken a positive outlook, and it's been a good fun
Sure,
conversation.
yeah. Yeah.
And I wondered, just to kind of finish off a couple last things, how can people support your work if they're at home listening to this, feeling inspired? What can they do to help support you in your work?
Yeah, so the things that I would really like people to do is to think about the ways that they engage with wildlife and how that might potentially be detrimental to the species that they really care about. So I think most people that have negative effects on wildlife probably don't think that they do or aren't aware that they do. So if you're traveling, do your research before you go. If you have the opportunity to have direct contact with a wild animal, please don't pay to do that. Don't pay for photos. Don't pay to interact with wild animals. Try to see them in the wild,
Mhm.
and then make sure that whatever you're posting about that on social media is appropriate and also not harming the wildlife or the animals, or not creating unrealistic expectations in other people who are then going to go and travel and interact with wildlife. um, so those are the things I really would like people to consider. And then the other thing that we always need is money. Conservationists always, we're always on a shoestring. We always need money, and so money always helps. And it doesn't have to be us. If you're interested in lemurs and you want to support lemur conservation, go to the Lemur Conservation Network and find the species that you love the most. Find a project that really inspires you and support them. Even if it's not a lot of money, even if it's £5 a month or something, that can make a difference to a small charity. So I just encourage people to get involved in some way. You may not be able to physically go there or be a conservationist for as your career, but you can definitely support people doing this work.
Mhm. Perfect. And if specifically they want to follow LemurLove,
Sure,
I guess I'll put all the links to social media and things in the
great.
description of the episode so they can find it. But I take it you're on Instagram and Twitter and all these
We
places.
are, yeah, and we're most active on Facebook and Instagram. So if people are on those platforms, that's where we post the most often.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, and I will make sure to funnel as many people that way as I can. So
Great,
thank you
yeah,
very,
thank you. Yeah,
thank you,
super.
thank you. And we are back. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you really enjoyed that conversation. It was incredible, and I think you can probably tell from my excitement now and throughout the chat. It was a great time bouncing these ideas off one another, and kind of, yeah, it was just me. Well, I say bouncing ideas. I was receptive to all the ideas and occasionally asked a silly question or whatever. But it was a really great chat, and I really really enjoyed having it. So thank you so much, Marnie, and thank you to everybody for listening, because it was, without you listening, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do so. I really, really hope you enjoyed, and I really hope you appreciated learning about the kind of pet trade aspect, about the empowering women aspect, about the TB aspects, as scary as they were. I hope you enjoyed learning about them, and I hope that all of the stories and all of the information will make an impact on your life in some way. There was some great advice in there as well, so I really hope all of you appreciated that and have got something to take away with you as well. But yes, before we spiral into me just thanking everyone, I should probably, sadly, wrap up the episode. All that remains, I suppose, is to tease you with what's coming on the next episode, and that is another episode with Saheno. So you may remember her from a few weeks ago. We talked about baobabs. Well, she is going to be back, and she's going to talk about her journey learning to love lemurs, because she actually works for LemurLove as well. And so, yeah, it kind of brings it all together. And yeah, you'll get to hear about how she went from someone who wasn't necessarily predisposed to love and have a connection with lemurs to someone who is leading the way on their conservation. So, really, really interesting story on the next episode as well. Of course, you can check out all of the things that we discussed in the episode in the description. So, all of the websites, all of the resources, everything will be down in the description. So, check that out if you're interested. And while you're down there, you can also find us on social media. Subtle plug. We also have our social media down there. It is at Pangolin Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, everywhere you can find us. We are there posting all of the time about various different things. So make sure and check that out. And yeah, that's kind of all of the. Oh, and subscribe to us on your podcast streaming service of choice. That is all of the promo done. So all that remains is for me to say, of course, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Marnie, once again. And yes, I guess until next time, thank you so much for joining me as we've explored the land of the lemurs. Thank you.